A moment, Johnny Herbert. We've just had about 7 cars out so far, and it does appear that the track is considerably slower than yesterday. Not quite sure the reason for that. Perhaps it's the temperature. One big piece of news is that Jean Alesi, after that accident yesterday, has damaged his neck. He is not actually going to qualify today. He is already, of course, qualified for the race. He did one slow lap in practice this morning. Too much pain from his neck. It's not even certain that he's actually going to take part in the race, John.
Well, that's very disappointing for Alesi, for Tyrrell, of course, after the Spanish Grand Prix, where Alesi was fairly rudely bumped off by Berger to come to Suzuka, and of course Tyrrell have got Japanese sponsors, so we are all hoping and keeping everything crossed that John Alesi will be fit. Although he has said after this morning's one lap look at the circuit he wouldn't run this afternoon, it is possible, I think, that he at some point might just have a little look out and see, because of course race conditions on Sunday are going to be similar to what they are right now, and it is important to get as much experience. He may well choose to go out and do a number of laps, for example, on a race setup rather than going for outright qualifying.
Well, Johnny Herbert there has just improved his time quite substantially. About a second quicker, moves him up into 17th spot as we see the youngest man in the race, 22-year-old Gianni Morbidelli in the Minardi Ford, his second ever Grand Prix, former Formula 3 champion from Italy, raced in Formula 3000 this year, of course, took part in the very first Grand Prix of the season at Phoenix, where he was substituting for Emanuele Pirro in the Dallara team. Of course, he will be a full-time driver in the Minardi team next year. The team has basically dispatched Paolo Barilla back to sports car racing after 3 consecutive non-qualifyings. So here we have just 22 years old Gianni Morbidelli.
Yes, well, he's just done a lap half a second quicker than he managed to do on Friday afternoon, so Morbidelli improving. And we're looking at the track. We thought this morning the track conditions were slightly slower, and in fact, in the first 10-15 minutes of qualifying this afternoon, it didn't appear that the track was going to be as quick as it was on Friday afternoon, but now we're seeing some of the midfield runners certainly improving marginally on their times from Friday.
Yes, John, and there we see Alex Caffey, Arrow's team, confirming that their lineup for 1991 will be Michele Alboreto and Alex Caffey. They showed us the Porsche engine yesterday. It certainly looked good. And they also told us that the team is actually dropping the Arrows name. Well, there's Nigel Mansell, one of the big names, one of the big 4, just about to go out. Mansell currently qualified in 4th spot. Just to remind you of the times from Friday. Berger fastest, Prost 2nd, Senna 3rd, Mansell 4th, and it was Boutsen. Alesi, told you, has got a problem with his neck. Patrese 7th, Martini 8th, PK 9th. Nakajima in 10th spot. None of those top 10 positions have changed yet, although Nakajima has just gone fractionally quicker. Capelli 11th, he's improved a little bit today already. Suzuki, he's been out one qualifying lap and he didn't improve. Then Warwick, Moreno, Gugelmin, none of those are improved. Moreno very quick in this morning's session, actually posting 3rd fastest time and being top of the tree for a considerable amount of time. Good news too from Emanuele Pirro. He crashed yesterday in qualifying, didn't get in a full lap. He's been out just a few moments ago and turned a 1 minute 43.393 to get him into the show. Currently qualified 24th. The 4 not currently in: Briard, Tarquini, Dalmas and Bertrand Gasho. Gasho, another man who crashed yesterday, that yellow Coloni, taking a lot of damage, but the Italian mechanics worked all night and they've got that car going again, so good effort from them.
Well, I don't think Bertrand Gasho is going to get much success this afternoon, Andrew, because as fine an effort as the Coloni mechanics made, just the car really isn't up to it. It isn't quick enough. And in a way, it's a shame for Bertrand Gasho because he is a very quick driver, and I think given a competitive car, he would do very well indeed. But here you are with Nigel Mansell coming onto the back straight. He's still on his first lap out. He's beginning to pick up speed. Because this is such a long lap, it's very important to remember at what point of the circuit you want to pick up speed and get your qualifying tyres really up to their ideal working condition. And Mansell now really getting to that particular position, coming into this controversial, very slow, very bumpy, and I think pretty awful right-left chicane. Now getting on with the program, accelerating 2nd, 3rd, 4th gears, a 7-speed gearbox in the Ferrari. Mansell's fingers are blur at the back of the steering wheel because this car doesn't have the conventional gearbox, but two little levers behind the steering wheel which help him change gear. So down into this double right-hand corner, the second part being much tighter. Now again, third gear, fourth gear into this next left. You can see the vibration. Look at Mansell's hands, the flaring of the hands.
This is where he crashed in 87, isn't it? Just there.
Yes. Just coming through this sequence of corners, Mansell had that awful crash in 87. Now, this is the long left-hand corner of the exit, and here he's probably getting in sixth gear. Very quick indeed here. Now he's straight back on the brakes, down to fourth gear, flick the car over the curb, then down into second gear, this even tighter right-hand corner, again up the curb. Look at the dust flying off the back of the left rear wheel. Then into this second gear, probably in the Ferrari. Very tight. Mansell can power on again. Just as difficult there. The track, there's not a lot of grip. Then again up through the gearbox, fifth, sixth gear, in this very, very long late apex right-hand corner, coming into the, again, long double apex left-hand spoon corner. I don't know why they call a corner a spoon on a racetrack. I think it's somewhat inappropriate, but that's what they call it here. And now onto the straight, up to seventh gear in this Ferrari gearbox. Probably coming up to close to 190, 195 miles an hour. Then down to sixth, and then quickly this very fast left-hand corner. Stay off those curbs, because Pirro got into big trouble by getting across it. Then back down, first gear, right, left, and really, I would think you want to stay off the curbs. Mansell went through there cleanly. Looks good for Mansell so far. 38.7.
Yes, that moves him up to third spot. Carves off 0.2 of a second there, fifth of a second off for Mansell. So he improves to third spot. And Alan Prost, meanwhile, puts his earplugs in, getting ready.
This is what Ayrton Senna didn't want, because he's really concerned about the Ferrari performance. We were hearing just before we came on air that Ayrton saying that, you know, Ferrari have put a tremendous effort into these races, this one and in Australia, and in particular the fuel that Ferrari are using now. Well, it's all petrol, and that's a very loose word to describe the fuel. It really is a mixture of chemicals, and I think that everybody believes in the pit lane, whatever Ferrari are using, it is as far removed from petrol as probably water is. So Senna really highlighting the fact that Ferrari are using a fuel that, while it is totally legal, is probably, let's say, very volatile.
Okay, John, well, just to recap, Berger not out yet, Senna just going out now. We'll take a short break. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Qualifying lap, currently down in fourth spot. Can he improve? Prost currently still in second place. Senna out on that first reconnaissance lap before he really turns on the power, and we'll see if he can improve from his current 1:38.828. The bright yellow Senna helmet of Ayrton Senna, 50 Grand Prix pole positions to his credit. Way more than anyone else, twice more than anyone else currently in Grand Prix racing. You look at the list of pole positions: Senna 50, Jim Clark 33, Fangio 28, Niki Lauda 24, and then next to the current drivers, Nelson Piquet 24, Alan Prost only 20 pole positions in his career, with a lot more wins than that, of course, and Nigel Mansell 15 pole positions. Well, Gerhard Berger in the last season, this current season, had 2 poles provisionally on the pole here as Senna works up to speed. And John, what's going through his mind?
Well, I think Senna's really thinking about the race. He wants to get onto the front row of the grid. We've been talking about the situation, about the importance of the front row of the grid here at Suzuka, and really what we saw 3 weeks ago in Spain. Well, there's one of the, looks like one of the Brabhams. That's just at the hairpin bend. It was pulled off, being pulled off as Senna went round. There's mechanical problem with that car more than anything else. It's not an accident. There's David Brabham running back, so his car, something's happened to him. He stopped out on the track. He had in fact had a rather unpleasant surprise this morning when the right rear suspension broke at one of the quickest parts of the track. But now Senna getting up to speed. You can hear the revs build up, and really the importance of the pole position or the front row here at Suzuka is paramount. There are really very few places to pass on the circuit, and the one passing place that we have seen is coming into this very tight chicane. And of course last year that was the scene of the championship conclusion where Senna and Prost collided, and to be in the front row really is so important.
Well, you see that special graphic, we saw it here last year, provided by Fuji TV, and that is not a simulation at all. In fact, that graphic is connected direct to the telemetry of the McLaren is being bounced up to a helicopter, back down into the Fuji control room, and it produces this fantastic graphic, and that is a genuine speed.
It's just amazing how rapidly the speed rises and falls. I mean, you're looking at it, the numbers are just going up, 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 and then they drop down as rapidly. You can understand the acceleration of these engines. They got probably 700 horsepower with a Honda V10 engine, but it's the deacceleration. When you lift off the throttle, even without touching the brakes, the deacceleration is so rapid because of the aerodynamic downforce. And of course, then when you come on the carbon fiber brake, it's even more rapid. So these figures are going to rise and fall with a speed almost it's hard to believe.
Yes, well, Senna looking to improve on 1:38.8. Really needs to find half a second on this lap to get in front of his teammate Gerhard Berger.
Well, it looks a pretty good lap so far. Although he got up in the curve, that didn't hinder him at all. And I think that Senna really has put a lot of effort and concentration into this first qualifying lap on Saturday afternoon. We'll have to wait another couple of seconds and see. Well, he's on pole position, 1:37.541.
Alan Prost looks up at a timing monitor in the Ferrari pit and knows that he's got a lot of work to do.
And Senna will be quite a happy boy with that effort because it was a clean lap. We've seen Senna do this in the past. He's got that ability. He just maximises the horsepower of the engine. On the sticky qualifying tyres, of course, it doesn't hinder the McLaren chassis quite as much as it might do in the race when the race tyres are more durable. But that was a very, very good lap indeed, and it really just emphasises how good Ayrton Senna is.
Yes, there was no fireworks, John. It was all smooth, calculated. The man thinks ahead of the car.
Well, he's using the energy his car has now so positively. I mean, he's got a lot of horsepower. He's got a pretty good car. It's not probably the best out-and-out handling car, but he's able to use it so effectively. And everything he did on that lap was, I couldn't criticise it at all. And I mean, coming down to the chicane, we saw him coming out of that very fast left-hander. He used the curb, but it didn't hinder him. He wasn't having to get off the power prematurely. He wasn't having to check any movement of the car. And that was really an outstanding and a superb lap from Senna. But of course, we've still got 30 minutes left of this session. And Alan Prost watched that intently from his car. There's a timing monitor in the pit as well as a TV monitor, so he was able to see just where Senna was fast, and he was able to see the time being flashed up instantly. Senna went across the start-finish line. So Prost, his time is a 1:38.684. He's got to find just over a second to pip Senna, and that's not going to be easy, in spite of all the advantages that we think the Ferrari team has with their car, with the fuel they're using, and of course with Alan Prost, who really is driving absolutely superbly at the minute.
Good time from Johnny Herbert in the Lotus Lamborghini. Just recorded a 1:41.558 off our screen. Moves up to 15th slot. Johnny Herbert really settling in well. Of course, he does know the circuit pretty well. Been racing here in Japanese Formula 3000 this season.
I think the local knowledge of Suzuka is so invaluable because a lot of the drivers who come here, they only come here once a year. Ayrton Senna, Gerhard Berger, they do test here frequently. But for the younger drivers, the ones that only come here occasionally and are not used to driving on such demanding racetracks, well, we've seen incidents from them, and Johnny Herbert's effort, I think, is superb, considering the amount of time he's had in the car. But really, that is a reflection, I would say, of the knowledge he's had here from driving Formula 3000, and of course, in Porsche and the Verne Schuppen sports car team.
Yes, well now Thierry Boutsen out. Thierry Boutsen won pole position this season, the Hungarian Grand Prix, where of course he did win the race subsequently. Boutsen currently shown in 5th spot on our timing monitor. This is the first flying lap.
And again, from Boutsen, it looks a very good lap. This is not quite halfway around the lap, but very little misuse, I would say, of the circuit, of the curves. But of course, the Williams-Renault package really hasn't developed and shone, particularly in the second part of the season, outside of his performance in the Hungaroring, which really was a tremendous performance indeed. But on the faster circuits, the car engine combination has not been as effective as Ferrari and McLaren.
We just saw Gerhard Berger, who was deposed of pole position just a few moments ago by his teammate Ayrton Senna, getting ready to go out. But meanwhile, we're going with Thierry Boutsen, the Belgian, who drives for Ligier next season. At least we think he does. Odd little rumours in the Italian press say that that contract may be torn up and he may go to Benetton. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Our thoughts, of course, with Sandro Nannini this weekend. Sandro, that terrible helicopter crash. And I think you've got some latest news on that, John, but let's just take the time. Boutsen 1:39.565. Boutsen improves by just a whisker, makes no difference to his position overall, remains in 5th spot. But that news on Nannini.
Well, Nannini has been making some comments the last couple of days in Italy, and he is saying that if he isn't fit to compete in Grand Prix racing by 1992, and that's a realistic date, I think, to set for a comeback. I think to think of Grand Prix racing in 91 would be very optimistic. But if he feels that he's not up to the task, and it's a very strenuous task of driving a Grand Prix car today, then he'll go back and join his father in his father's bakery business, and that really would be a great shame if he isn't able to compete. But of course, with such serious injuries to his arm, and in particular his right arm, the chance of making a complete recovery is something we're really hoping for, but at this stage is not maybe realistic.
Our thoughts too this weekend, of course, with Martin Donnelly, still in a serious condition in the Royal London Hospital there in the East End, under the care of Professor Sid Watkins. He is making progress. John, I think you've also got an update on Martin's condition.
Yes, Martin is responding to input, to reflexes, and they do various little things to keep him aware of that he is being looked after, and a number of the journalists have been in to see him and have spoken to the people around, to his girlfriend Diane McWhirter, and
I don't think the journalists actually been allowed to see him, but they're speaking to Denise. But well, a couple of them have. Right?
Yes, they have. A couple of the journalists from Northern Ireland have been in and had a few moments with Martin. And really now it's a matter of waiting for him to regain full consciousness, and at that stage then I think the progress will become much more rapid. At this stage they're really looking after him and caring for him very closely indeed.
Gerhard Berger goes on to his quick lap. His first qualifying attempt of the two that he'll make this afternoon here at a packed house at Suzuka.
Let's watch Gerhard here, Andrew, because contrast his driving style with that we've just seen of Ayrton. Gerhard, as we pointed out yesterday, does attack the racetrack very much more than Ayrton Senna does, and we've seen Senna doing a very impressive 1:37.5. Gerhard now going to go out and try and join his teammate on the front row. He is currently on the front row with the time from yesterday, but I think that 38.3 may well have to be improved upon to retain a front row position.
It was a bit wide out there, wasn't it?
Yes, well, locking up the left front coming into the tight hairpin bend. Gerhard really does seem to pump himself up for these qualifying laps, and with Alan Prost again on his qualifying run as well. So we're jumping backwards and forwards between Berger and Prost, but of course Prost maybe being the more interesting of the two, since he's the main challenger. Here we are back with Berger in the spoon, exiting the corner, getting up that curb. That curb caused problems yesterday for Alio and Gasio. Both of them ended up spinning into the barrier on the left side of the track, in fact bringing the qualifying on Friday afternoon to a halt. But Berger now through this final very quick left-hand corner, well up the curb. It looks good so far. It's just, oh dear me, he's so aggressive. Look at that, much too much. He got the power on too early, kicked the tail out, had to come off the throttle, lost the momentum, but 38.11, he's still on the front row. An improvement of 0.2 of a second. Ron Dennis nodding his head in approval with that, thinking, well, it wasn't too bad considering the time he lost, and he lost a couple of tenths there in the exit of the corner. So now we're back with Alan Prost in the spoon. Prost's driving style, of course, is very similar to Senna's these days. Very, very smooth, very calculating. A real artist behind the steering wheel of his Ferrari.
Yes, Alan Prost, just 20 pole positions to his credit. And interesting to note that other than Ferrari, Williams and McLaren, no other manufacturer has been on pole position, John, since the 1987 San Marino Grand Prix. That was Senna, of course. Teams like Tyrrell haven't been on pole position since 1976. There is 1:38.180 for Alan Prost, and that still leaves him on row 2 of the grid. He'll be very disappointed in that. Senna watching. Well, Ayrton Senna has still got another run. In fact, all the top runners have got another run. We'll be bringing that to you in just a few moments, but let's take a short break. Riccardo Patrese currently in 7th spot with a time of 1:40.355. This afternoon he's been out for one qualifying attempt and did not improve, 1:41.194. As we switch back to Satoru Nakajima, very much the favourite son here, the 37-year-old from Okazaki City, the 7 times Japanese Formula 2 champion. Started his Grand Prix racing in Brazil in 1987. This year, a couple of 6th places with the Tyrrell, with the Hart-tuned engine in the back. And news coming this weekend that Hart will be supplying its version of the Cosworth V8, the old Cosworth V8, exclusively to the Larousse team next year. Larousse, of course, losing their Lamborghini engines, but the Hart, a pretty good replacement, I would suggest, as Nakajima hoping to improve. Currently qualified in 12th spot, has made an improvement today. Nakajima started winning races way back in 1974, driving a rotary Mazda RX-2, I think it was, and won a saloon car championship way back then. And well, much of his career has been in Japan. As we said, he had sort of 15 years or so racing in Japan before moving over. Did test a JPS Lotus about 3 seasons before he actually moved into Grand Prix racing on a day that where I was in attendance at Donington, where I think it was Prince Michael of Kent also drove the car and finished up knocking a wheel off it. Everybody kept very quiet about that at the time. But meanwhile, he goes on his way. John, what about this man? Very popular here. You were talking to some Japanese fans about him last night.
Yes, Satoru Nakajima, of course, is a very, very highly respected driver in Japan. And that reputation hasn't come across in Europe so well. And I think largely that's to do with the fact that Satoru Nakajima is a very traditional Japanese man. Aguri Suzuki, for example, is a much more modern Japanese character, and coming to live in Europe and work in Europe, and of course the language barrier, the language problem is very much for Nakajima. He's not fluent. I think your interview with him on Friday probably illustrated that he can speak words, but he can't speak fluently. So I think the communication within the team and the difficulty of just food and living in England is getting on top of him a little bit.
Well, here's the other Japanese driver, Aguri Suzuki. Suzuki, considerably younger than Nakajima, 30 years old. And he's had a lot of success here, of course, but much more recently, 1985, he was a Japanese Formula 3 champion. 1986, Japanese Formula 2 champion. In 87, he moved up to Formula 3000 and finished second in the series that year. And then in 88, he won the Japanese Formula 3000 championship. And of course, at the end of that season, he drove for this team, Larousse, in just 1 race here in Japan. And then all last season, of course, he was in the Zack Speed Yamaha and failed to qualify most of the time. But he is a very promising young driver, a nice guy, particularly Europeanized for a Japanese. In fact, one of his grandparents, I believe, is French, and he nips past that Minardi very quick and very close there, John.
Well, again, a little bit of local knowledge of the circuit helped him there. He was able to, he's got so much confidence in the circuit. He knows precisely where he can and cannot take chances, and he took a chance getting through between the edge of the track and the Minardi. So it just illustrates the confidence. I haven't seen Suzuki drive with such confidence as we've seen. Now that little funny yellow thing that flicks up and down on your screen, that simulates the amount of throttle, the percentage of throttle that Suzuki is using. We actually had 103% on Friday afternoon. Now we don't know what 103% of throttle use is.
Bent the pedal, I reckon.
Well, he's certainly got 100% and 25. You see, he's back off and on. He's completely off the throttle and picking it up again. That's the spoon corner. Now 100% down the straight, changing gear. It'll flick off to 0. Well, he's not changing gear. Well, he has changed gear rather late. But
again, John, this is also connected to the telemetry of the car. Fuji TV, who are the sponsor of this race and also providing the coverage, really work hard at their Grand Prix racing. They've come up with this idea. It's absolutely magnificent, I think. So congratulations to all concerned. And let's see what sort of time he does. Quite a quick one. 1:40.887. He improves, and Suzuki moves up into the top 10 to 9th spot.
Yes, that's a fine effort from Suzuki again. That local knowledge and that little bit of sort of Japanese Grand Prix tension has gotten to him, and a 9th spot he's ahead of Nakajima, his Japanese contemporary, in 13th place.
Well, John, 15 minutes remaining. Let's just recap the current grid positions, the top 10 at least. Senna on the pole, 1:37.541. Berger second fastest, 138.118. Third fastest, Prost, 138.180. And fourth, Mansell, 138.742. All those drivers have made one run, could improve further, and they've all actually improved today, although we didn't think they would. There we've got a caption to back up what we were saying. Fifth fastest, Thierry Boutsen. Sixth fastest, Nelson Piquet. And then seventh fastest, Jean Alesi, not going out today, damage to his neck. And that was the result of an incident yesterday. Eighth fastest, Riccardo Patrese, going ninth now, Suzuki. And 10th, we haven't been mentioning him, John, Pierluigi Martini. Good effort from him, his time from yesterday. Then it's Warwick, Capelli, Nakajima, Moreno, Herbert, Gugelmin, Bernard and Larini.
You're talking about Jean Alesi. We didn't really see an awful lot of that accident. He just appeared coming down to the end of the pit straight not to take the corner. And in fact, on the news sheet that we got from Tyrrell, Alesi said he came down, went from 6th to 5th gear, turned the wheel and nothing happened. So the Tyrrell team haven't come up with any obvious explanation as to why that car went off, but he was travelling very quickly. And that incident probably was much worse than we ever got to see. And the impact probably just jarred his neck and some of the muscles and maybe tweaked one of the little vertebrae a little bit. So Alesi has done one lap this morning. He's chosen not to go out. I'm not sure whether that injury is so bad that he shouldn't go out, but of course by going out he feels maybe he's going to aggravate it more and therefore hinder him in the race, so he will choose not to run this afternoon. He has gone, he's dropped one place from yesterday. Piquet in fact has taken 6th spot from Alesi by 1/100th of a second, so Alesi now on the 4th row of the grid instead of being in the 3rd row of the grid. But in reality this race is not going to be a race where I would expect the Tyrrell Ford to shine anyway, in spite of Alesi's valiant effort in the Pirelli tired Tyrrell Hart Ford, because it's going to be about multi-cylinder engines, and by that I mean V10 and V12 engines, the Honda, the Ferrari, and to a lesser extent the Renault engine.
Well, Riccardo Patrese taking his second qualifying attempt, as you just saw a few seconds ago. Nigel Mansell also going out on his reconnaissance lap as Patrese goes through that chicane. It's officially called the Casio Triangle, but I think we're going to call it the chicane most of the time. And Patrese there going on to his second lap. So Patrese on the power, that V10 Renault engine with that unique valve system, uses pneumatic system rather than springs. That should help it rev higher than any of the other engines, about 14,000 and a little bit revs, and that's flat out. And now we go in car with Nigel.
Yes, Nigel just coming onto the back straight as we go back to Patrese. Oh, yes, running quite wide also, coming out of that tight right-hand corner.
And that, of course, is the area where the track crosses over, John. This circuit originally designed by the Dutchman John Hugenholtz, who also designed Zandvoort. And, of course, land's a bit expensive around here in Japan. You squeezed the circuit into a tight piece of land, and to do that, he put this crossover in, and it's not entirely unique in motor racing, certainly unique in Grand Prix racing, but there is a circuit in Argentina that I went to way back in 1968, giving my age away, called San Juan, right over in the far east of Argentina, which has a similar crossover, John.
Well, also to all our Eurosport Grand Prix fans up in Finland, there's a circuit up there as well.
That's right.
A little bit closer to Europe than Argentina, but of course it doesn't host Grand Prix racing, and this is the only circuit in Grand Prix racing that has got a flyover, as you say.
140.664, and Patrese not improving there. So Riccardo Patrese, one of the few of the leading runners not to improve.
And Mansell again doing the same thing he did earlier in the session, locking up that left front. Now sometimes there's a reason for that happening. It doesn't just happen by magic, and the way these racing cars are set up, each wheel is independently sprung. And the idea is to get the car side to side level, but if one side is slightly higher or lower, which is done intentionally or accidentally, you can get one wheel being slightly heavier than the other, and that's what causes that brake to lock.
Yes, we've just seen Williams Renault, and now we're seeing Manson. Of course, that will be the combination for for next year. We understand that Nigel probably won't drive the new Patrick Head design car, because there is a complete new car for next season until perhaps late February, early March time. Whether Nigel's going to do any testing in the current FW13B, I'm not absolutely sure.
Well, Mansell on the front row as well now.
37.719. Great effort there from Nigel Mansell, despite locking up the brakes. 137.719. Mansell goes second. A McLaren and a Ferrari on row 1. A McLaren and a Ferrari on row 2. Senna looks at the timing screen and has a think about it all.
Well, he's maybe thinking, maybe I better get back out there again. Mansell's time indicative of what Alan Prost ought to be capable of, and I was interested in watching Nigel. Although he locked up that brake, basically the lap was very clean, a mirror almost of Senna's, and coming through that chicane it was noticeable that both Senna and Mansell were particularly neat and tidy through it. They weren't clambering all over the curbing, which you saw Berger doing. The only thing was, I would say, with Mansell's car, in the left-hand part of that chicane, he had quite a lot of understeer on the exit, and that's a problem in the qualifying tyres, because the grip the tyre has got is really getting up, and it's in those crucial little chicanes where you want the tyre to really work for you. So I think if Mansell was able to get a little bit better grip in that second part of the chicane, he could probably have gone, maybe a tenth quicker or so.
Well, Derek Warwick has just gone past us. There's a split screen of the two drivers, looking into both their eyes at once. Clever stuff.
And we've got 9 minutes of qualifying left, so these two guys are going to be really thinking very intently indeed about how they're going to make their second qualifying runs. And, of course, timing is so important as well, to make sure the traffic is not busy at the point when you go out in the circuit. And again, a team, you rely quite heavily on your team and your team manager to give you the indication as to what we think is a good time for you to go out. But I don't know which one of these wants to go out first, because whatever time Senna does, it'll tell Prost, well, that's what I've got to beat. Prost maybe is the man who's got the most to do, because he's currently 4th quickest. So he's got to find somewhere like 0.6 of a second to demote Senna from pole position.
Johnny Herbert just coming back in. He just improved his time slightly there now on a 1:41.536, leaves him in 15th spot. Seeing those drivers looking up there, well, the pits here at Suzuka are beautifully appointed, and each pit has monitors both with the timing and television screen, and Alan Prost can actually look up and see himself on television. And yesterday he was making quite a few faces when he knew the camera was on him. He was gurning, I believe the expression is. John.
Yes, it was. In fact, if somebody didn't know, they might wonder what's a guy like that doing driving a racing car, because he had a sort of simple look about him, which, of course, we know is far from the truth. But he was able to look at himself. He thought it was amusing sitting in the garage, watching qualifying taking place and making funny faces.
Well, the first time in this session, we're watching Mauricio Gugelmin in the Leighton house. No longer any connection with March Engineering. That car, of course, sponsored by a Japanese company. A great number of Japanese sponsors now in Grand Prix racing. It was all started, 6-7 years ago now, by Canon. And, of course, they're still with Williams. But people like Footwork, and outside we've seen the Footwork delivery vans, John, haven't we?
Yes, we have, and they look very smart too.
And let's not forget the Espoo Corporation are now part owners of the LaRousse team. As Gugelmin, what sort of time's he going to do? 1:41 point, and he improves. Gugelmin now in 16th spot, so he's improved about half a second on yesterday's time. So the Brazilian now slowing down, and we're waiting to see what this man Gerhard Berger can do. Berger provisionally on the overnight pole. The four not in: Griard, Tarquini, Dalmas and Gachot. So the French AGS team not having a very good time. David Brabham, we saw him stopped on his out lap, his first lap in this qualifying. He hasn't been out yet. He's still in 23rd place, and Stefano Modena in 22nd place.
I wonder if Modena not going out, is that just purely a mechanical problem, or is that something, the consequence of what we saw happen to David Brabham this morning when he had that failure at the rear of the car, the way the rear suspension is attached to the gearbox of the car. We think that was the part that failed, and that was what failed in Modena in qualifying at Silverstone back in July, so that problem reoccurring again.
There's a man you know.
Yes, Steve Nichols, an engineer at Ferrari, and he was an engineer at McLaren in my day. A very fine engineer he is too. Ferrari are extremely lucky to have him working for them.
These engineers get some quite big paychecks these days, some of them getting paid more than the drivers, John.
Well, there are fewer top engineers, designers around than there are top drivers, and I think the situation, the market has dictated the price that is being paid for engineers, and of course if you haven't got a top car, you're not going to attract top drivers or, more importantly, top sponsorship to put the package together. But here we see Gerhard Berger in a pretty impressive package, arguably the best team in Formula One.
Gerhard Berger then out on his second qualifying run. The man who was on pole yesterday, can he reclaim it? Or will this man, Ayrton Senna, stay on that position? Or what about this man there, Alan Prost? He'd love to jump into pole position. He told us on Thursday, if I start from pole, there is no way the McLaren Hondas are going to catch me around this track. Interesting stuff.
And we've got 5 minutes of qualifying left, so really, the poor director of this program is going to be torn between Senna, Prost. There we are, looking in the Honda pits. They've got Berger currently on a lap, or he's just commencing his lap now. This is the start of Berger's. And he's going, oh dear me, what a shame. Well, fortunately, it was so early in the lap, he's aborted it. Alan Prost, who had just come out of the pits, unintentionally, I will say, got in Berger's way. Berger now going back to the pits, back to the start very slowly. Just telling Prost, you little so-and-so, or something like that in Austrian. I don't know what the equivalent would be in Austrian's version of German, but at least his tyres will not have been too badly used in that initial run charge from the chicane down to that first corner. So Berger will cruise back slowly indeed and have another shot on his second set of tyres.
Meanwhile, there we just saw Martini flashing through the picture, and now we've got Alex Caffey. Martini trying to get back in the top 10, currently qualified in the 11th spot.
Well, Nigel looking quite content with his little role. I mean, in fact, I think it's going to be quite difficult. There's going to be quite a lot of traffic out in these remaining now just 4 minutes. But Ayrton Senna seems to have not too much ahead of him and really nothing very much behind him either.
So it's Senna, Mansell, Berger, Prost, Boutsen, Piquet, Alesi, Patrese, Moreno. We missed that one. Moreno's just gone quickly off our screen up to 9th place, and then Suzuki in 10th position. Yeah, Moreno's certainly settling in very well to this team. Mr. Gotto, head of the Honda Formula One project.
And it's really now team managers with eyes glued to their monitors, because we've now got Senna almost now completing his second reconnaissance lap, and he's going really quite slowly, so he's trying to keep the tyre as healthy as possible. These one-lap qualifying tyres, it is a very long lap round. Listen to the engine picking up the revs now on the throttle. First, second, third, fourth gears. Prost probably about 10 seconds behind him. So a little excitement here. Senna just coming across the start-finish line now. Down into this very quick entry to this double right-hand corner, then the second part very much slower. And into the first of the left, then the right. You hear coming off the throttle. There we are, the speedometer, the kilometer on the right, 200, 125 miles an hour, 130, 140, then coming up to probably just over 160 miles an hour, 170 before he goes down to fourth gear, through that very, very quick right. It's a flick and a reel, and down into third gear for that nasty little tighter right-hand corner. Up to probably that Honda engine must be revving close to 14,000. You can hear it straining as he was holding the gear. In qualifying, Honda allowed the drivers to run up to 14,000 or thereabouts. They don't actually say precisely what the rev limit is in qualifying, but whatever it is, it's astronomical.
Saw the brakes there glowing cherry red, John. Hard application. Suggestions here that Honda are actually able to change the fuel mixture by telemetry, actually making that telemetry proactive. What do you know of that?
Well, I think certainly they've got a different chip for the engine management system for qualifying. They have a qualifying chip, and that just dumps more fuel in. They're not concerned with economy. But this again looks another superb lap from Senna. And I think the conservation of those tyres and that out lap really has paid dividends, because he came off that corner even quicker he did in the first lap. Yes, 36.996. Truly remarkable. A fantastic lap.
Yes, Ayrton Senna maintains his pole position by going even quicker. Prost now 37.228, Mansell 37.719. So the big four still at the top. There is Prost. Right, well now the final positions. Ayrton Senna on that pole. That great final effort, 136.996. Alongside him on the front row of the grid. He did it in the wake of Ayrton Senna. We didn't see it on the screen. Alain Prost moving up onto the front row with a 137.228. Third fastest, bumped back to the second row of the grid, Nigel Mansell.
Set your alarm clocks to see it live here on Eurosport at 4:30 tomorrow morning. For the heavy sleepers, you can catch it on Eurosport Sunday at a more civilised hour tomorrow. So let's now take it.